and we are telling the story of Pontius Pilate. A salvo of trumpet blasts echoed across Rome, saluting the sunrise on the 1st April AD 26. Okay, we say that Jesus died somewhere around AD 33, somewhere in there. So Jesus is alive, not dead yet. Okay, it was the daily signal for synchronizing water clocks with the moment of the sun's appearance, a courtesy provided by men of the Praetorian Guard, billeted in their new camp at the edge of the city. Rome's day had begun at least an hour earlier with the first choral glimmer of dawn, when many of the merchants started opening their shops. By the time the sun peered over the hills east of Rome, the city was a raucous symphony of clattering carts, hammer blows, and screaming babies. Some in the leisure class allowed themselves the luxury of slumbering on till 7 o'clock, but only those who had wined to excess would rise any later. The citizens of Rome took advantage of every daylight hour because nights were dark and illumination poor. This makes a lot of sense, right? There's no lights. So you sleep when it's dark and you're awake when it's light. From the commanding heights of his palace terrace on the Palatine Hill, Tiberius Caesar Augustus looked out across his noisy capital with a lethargic stare, half hoping that Rome would somehow vanish along with the morning mist, that all 14 districts of the city might slowly dissolve into the Tiber and be disgorged into the Mediterranean like so much waste. Tiberius was well through his 12th year as princeps, which is first citizen of or emperor of Rome, that lofty office which he could not enjoy because of its demands, nor yet lay down without shattering precedent and inviting personal peril. So we're talking about Tiberius. He's currently the lead guy here in Rome. Unbiased voices in Rome agreed that Tiberius was governing surprisingly well, considering his unenviable role of having had to follow the glittering career of his stepfather, the now divine Augustus. And Tiberius had come to power under the most unflattering circumstances. Augustus had first appointed others to succeed him, naming Tiberius only after these had died. Now Tiberius nourished an obsessive resentment at having been the emperor by default. So he wasn't chosen first by his stepdad. He was down the line, but other people died. And so he took over, listening too hard for the inevitable whispered comparisons and brooding too often over his bitter, corrosive memories of his stepfather Augustus. A tall, erect figure despite his 66 years, so Tiberius is 66 years old, the princeps turned back into the palace for a breakfast of wine-soaked bread, pullet eggs, and a brimming cup of mulsum, a wine and honey mixture without which, Isaac, could you stop, please? Without which no Roman could face the day. Tiberius ate alone, fatedly alone. The joy of family life was denied him. When he was a boy of 4, the first tragedy had occurred. His mother, Livia, divorced his father in order to marry Augustus. A bit of ambitious social climbing, common enough for that era. So it did happen then. People were divorcing, so she divorced his dad to marry this other guy because it was a better move for her in society. What scandalized Rome was the fact that on the day of her second wedding, Livia was 6 months pregnant by her previous husband. That night, the statue of virtue supposedly fell on its face in the forum and had to be repurified at great expense. Not until his own happy marriage with Vespania could Tiberius forget his complicated childhood. But Augustus doomed that marriage too. He insisted that Tiberius, as future successor, divorce his beloved wife Vipsania in order to marry his only offspring, Julia, instead. So desperately did Augustus want his personal bloodline to continue. So the father made Tiberius, his stepson, divorce his wife and marry his daughter. Now they're not related, right? They have different mom and dad, right? Do you understand that? So he's got a mom and a dad, right? His mom is pregnant with him when she divorces his dad. Everybody following? She gets married to Augustus. So Augustus is not his biological father, okay? But he has a daughter, Julia. What they don't tell us here, if Julia and him have the same mother, I don't know. But this was not incredibly uncommon at the time. He wants his bloodline to continue, so he wants him to marry Julia, who's his daughter. Okay? Yet Julia soon became Rome's civic personification of vice, a woman so adulterous and vile that Augustus himself banished her for life to a Mediterranean island. So she was so yucky, just so vile, that he kicked her out. Only his son was left to Tiberius, Drusus, the promising heir apparent. But he died of a strange illness 3 years earlier. Tiberius Caesar, sovereign of 70 million people in an empire extending from the English Channel to the gates of Mesopotamia. So basically this extends almost to where our map right here begins. Right, Kari? Begin it right here, okay? We're like right over here. Was a man quite alone. So now he has no wife. He beckoned to his servant, pondered for a moment, and said, "Send word to Sejanus that I'll see him this afternoon at the 8th hour." The domestic delivered the message to one of the Praetorian bodyguards, who hurried off eastward toward the mansion of Sejanus on the slopes of the Esquiline. So if you wanted to send a message, you actually had to send somebody who would run the message over, right? There's no way otherwise to do it. So L. Aelius Sejanus, they're going to call him Sejanus in the book, was prefect or commander of the Praetorian Guard, the corps of elite troops who protected the emperor and served as Rome's government police. A swarthy, muscular figure of large build, Sejanus was today flawlessly draped in a white woolen public toga. The prefect was middle-aged, though ageless in the eyes of the women of Rome, and he betrayed Etruscan ancestry in his non-alkaline features. So basically, they're saying he doesn't look like a typical Roman, unlike the typical high-bridged Roman face. The inner Sejanus, his real loyalties and true political motives, was a storm center of controversy. Many claim that Rome never had a more selfless and public-minded official, certainly never a more efficient one. But his opponents hinted darkly that Sejanus was a true Etruscan of old pre-Republic stock, and as such, Rome's mortal enemy, a ghost of Tarquin risen up to haunt the empire. Okay, we are going to stop there, and we will continue reading this. So bring your book if you have it, and we'll continue.